Yo, what is up guys, welcome to a new video and welcome to a new dummies video. I know it's been a long time since the last one, but if you didn't know, I have a series where I talk about the basics on production, and I've made a compression for dummies, EQ for dummies, reverb for dummies, and delay for dummies. And today is a time for limiting for dummies. And don't get me wrong, I'm not insulting you, okay? It's just a way to name this series. So I'm gonna talk about what is limiting, how to use it, why you want to use it, and also I'm gonna talk about why I prefer limiting over compression. And before going to the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel because this is the way you can help me and support the channel. And also don't forget to follow me on Instagram because there I post daily things, I talk with you. Sometimes I ask you what kind of tutorials I can make here in YouTube. I do live streams and things like that. So follow me there. And with that being said, don't worry more and let's start with this. So well, what is limiting? In easy words, limiting is just cutting the sound that is too loud. Just that. As we saw in the compressor for dummies, there is a thing called threshold, and it's just a dB you put, a value you put, and everything that goes above this value is gonna get affected in another way. For example, in the compression, if this is the threshold and we have a sound that is louder than this, it's gonna get reduced in volume. But here in the limiting, the thing that goes above this threshold is just gonna get cut. We're not gonna let go above this. So in other words, the limiting is just like a brick wall compressor or a compressor with an infinite ratio. Why do we want to have this? Why do we want to apply it, and cut the dBs of a sound? The limiting is so useful to control the volume of a sound and get more or less an average volume. Let's imagine that we have a vocal and the average volume is like this and we have a lot of peaks. What's gonna happen? When we try to put the vocal in the right volume, as we're hearing those peaks, probably we're gonna reduce the volume. But then in some parts where we don't have those peaks or the volume is a bit lower, the vocal is gonna be too quiet, so we're gonna be increasing the volume. But now those peaks are too loud. So with limiting, we're gonna solve this problem. We're gonna just cut that. And maybe you're thinking, but it's better to use compressor because this way, instead of cutting the volume, we're just reducing it. Yes and no. Let's say that we have a vocal that in one part is like this, but then in another part is just like this. In that case, yeah, use the compressor because this way you're reducing the volume of a big part, of the sound. But when we talk about just small peaks, it's better to just use limiting. It's gonna be a lot easier, and you're not really gonna hear that we're cutting the dBs or something like that. So well, how to use a limiter depends of course in every limiter, but the one I use the most is the L1 limiter by Waves because it's so simple to use. You just open the plugin, you have like a button with two arrows, you click there and you drag down and you're limiting. Just with that, you don't have to touch anything else. Of course, there are other limiters that are a lot more advanced and have a lot more other things, but in my opinion with this one it's just good enough. Then when we talk about mastering is another thing. Maybe in the mastering you want to use more advanced ones like the FabFilter Pro L or maybe the invisible limiter, but basically in the end it's gonna do the same. But probably those ones are gonna distort less when you limit too much. So how much is too much limiting? In my experience, in the L1 at least, I don't really recommend to go on 6 dBs of reduction or more. So I try to go on 3-4 dBs of reduction because I realized that if I get 6 or more dBs of reduction, I start getting some distortion, and this is something that you don't want. So now we know what is the limiting, why to use it, how to use it. But what's the actual result that we're gonna have with this limiting? Let's say that you're working on a track and you are limiting, for example, the leads, you're limiting the chords, you're limiting the bass line, you're limiting the vocal. Then when you export the track, you're gonna have a file with a kind of average sound in the waveform. You're not gonna have a lot of peaks. But what happens if you don't limit anything? That this waveform is gonna have a lot of peaks. And what's the problem with that? That when you're gonna master your track, you're gonna have more problems because those peaks are gonna reach first the limiter. And as you're gonna be limiting them too much, you're gonna start getting distortion, and this is something that you don't want to do. But if you limit every sound, or better, every layer of the track, of course you don't need to do it in everything, absolutely everything. So then when you use the limiter, all the peaks are gonna get reduced more or less in the same way. So if there is distortion, there's distortion in everything. So you don't need to limit that much. And here comes a tip. If you want to limit more a sound because there are really huge peaks or whatever, use 2 limiters. If you use a limiter reducing 5 dBs and then you use another limiter reducing another 5 dBs, then result is 10 dBs of reduction. But probably it's not gonna distort. But if you use just one limiter reducing 10 dBs, probably it's gonna distort. So now that we know everything about the limiting, what it is, how to use it, and what's the end result of it and why it's good, why do I prefer limiting over compression? When I was starting making music, I saw a lot of tutorials about big artists. All of them were saying that they were compressing and applying crazy techniques. So I said, okay, if they use it, I have to use it too. But what happens with the compressor? Most of the compressors, not all of them, have the tag, have the release, maybe have a look ahead and a knee or other things. And here comes the problem. If you don't really know how to use these settings, what values you need in every setting, probably you're gonna mess up your sound. So as I said, when I started making music, I was trying to compress. And after a long time, I realized I was destroying the sound. Maybe I was applying a bit of a tag where I didn't want to apply a tag, or I was just cutting the attack where I want some attack. But in my opinion, the worst scenario was when I kind of get like a sighting effect. And it's because sometimes when you apply some attack and release settings, if you compress a lot, of course, if it's just 1 dB or 2 dB, probably you're not gonna realize about this. But if you compress a lot, you're gonna see that like you're applying like a sighting effect, you know, like a bumping effect. And actually you don't want this. So I said, okay, do I really need the compression? In my opinion, no, at least in electronic music. All the synths are kind of flat where they come out from the synth. The compression is really useful when there are recorded live sounds, for example, vocals. But on the vocals, as I said a lot of times, I use compressors where I don't have to touch the attack and the release. So in synth sound on samples, I just use the limiting because this way I cut those peaks that can be a bit annoying, and as I don't have to touch any attack, any release, any knee or settings like that, I'm not gonna have any problem on this. So it's gonna be a lot safer for me. And I realized that most of the times you don't need compression, especially for electronic music. And there are a lot of big artists that are releasing music in the biggest labels and they don't compress. But of course, with this tutorial, I'm not saying that you should never use compression. If you want to try it, just try it, but be careful with it, especially if you're just starting making music. So well guys, with that being said, we already know what is limiting, why we want to use it, what's the effect of it, and why I prefer the limiting over the compression. I hope this tutorial helped you in any way. If it did, just leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any tutorial. And also, you don't miss the new section in this channel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I recommend you to go and check the previous video where I talk about the new section that you're gonna like a lot. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.